Well, welcome to Barcelona and welcome to this Volvo's new EX30. This new fully electric and only electric crossover is going to be Volvo's smallest model on sale, and also by far its most affordable. In fact, the very basic version of this will cost 38,500 euros. That makes it really very affordable by any electric car standard. I mean, that's smack in the same heartland as the likes of the Jeep Avenger and the Renault Megane E-Tech, and yet you're getting a Volvo with all that implies in terms of safety and premium look and feel and badge snobbery and sticking it to BMW owners. Yeah, all those things. What's really interesting about this car is, aside from the fact that it uses a completely new platform shared with Volvo's Chinese owners at Geely, is the fact that it will not only come with two different battery sizes, it comes with two completely different batteries. That basic 38,500 euro version gets what's called a lithium-iron phosphate battery, which, without getting into all the deep technical nerdery of it, is basically a cheaper, more efficient battery to build. Unfortunately, it also means less energy density in the battery, so you only get a range on the basic version of 344 kilometers. This is not that version. This is the medium spec version with a single rear-wheel drive 272 horsepower electric motor and a 69 kilowatt hour battery under the floor, and that gives it a claimed range of 472 kilometers. And that does seem fairly realistic. We'll come back to that in a minute. But 272 horsepower and 340 odd newton meters of torque, that's quite a lot for what is a compact family car. So is this a bit overpowered? No, because there's an even more powerful version, but we'll talk about that in a minute. I think what we need to do now is take a look at the interior, because that's where this car really starts to shake things up. I think the thing that really strikes you when you sit in here into the EX30 is that this does not look nor feel like the interior of a 38,000 euro car. Now, okay, in fairness, this is the mid-spec one. This is more like 45,000 euro, but the basics of the interior are the same, and the basics are exceptionally good. Pretty much everything you look at and touch looks and feels really high quality. The steering wheel feels great. These metal door handles look and feel phenomenally good. The armrest, the door pockets are lined with soft material so things don't rattle and clatter around. This one gets a big Harman Kardon sound bar at the base of the windscreen. There is an unusual touch, which is this sort of speckled effect here on the dashboard. This is because it's made of recycled plastics, which is obviously a very good thing. And indeed, Volvo makes great claims about this car having an exceptionally good manufacturing all the way through to scrapping full life CO2 emissions figure. Not everybody's going to like this effect. It does look a bit like the floor of a cash and carry. There are other variations you can get on it that look different and feel different, and that maybe will appeal to a few more people. I think one thing that will appeal to almost every one of these fantastic seats, again, lots of recycled materials going in here, but they are extremely comfortable. Just the right amount of squishiness and yet also supportive. It's a really good cabin. It's practical too. There is tons of storage space. The big door bins I've already mentioned. There's wireless phone charging here. Under here there's more storage. There's USB-C sockets, two of those there. There's a pop-out 2-cup holder thing and a tray underneath that. You can also just have that completely open. You can also slide it back so that it's a single cup holder if you want. This armrest does not open, but for those in the back there's a big storage area, and it actually pops out, and it's a removable tray, and it even has a little moose logo on it, which is quite nice. Nice little Swedish touch there. And if we're looking for Swedish touches, I'm just going to put that back. Apologies for the noise. There's also the Swedish flag here on the seats. So it's a really well set up environment here in the front, but there is an issue, and it's the touchscreen. Because this is the only screen in the cabin. There is no instrument panel here. There is no head-up display projected onto the windscreen. So like a Tesla 3, everything goes through this screen. Heating, ventilation, air conditioning, phone connection, navigation, even just doing something supposedly simple like opening the central glove box. There's no glove box in there, incidentally. It's a bit fiddly, and I'm not convinced that having the only speed display in the car up here at the top of the screen is necessarily the safest thing to do, and that does seem a bit of a surprise given Volvo's reputation. Personally, I'm finding it takes me longer to do that, to look at the screen there, than it would do to glance down here or look up at a head-up display projected onto the windscreen. That is not available in this car. Volvo does claim that it's done its research, that it's worked out where people look and how they look, and it's all perfectly fine. But I just think having your speed here means that every time you look at it, you're also going to be getting distracted by the rest of the screen. And speaking of the rest of the screen, there are too many things that require too many clicks. The actual menu layout and the way it all works is actually reasonably straightforward. But like I said, there are a few too many clicks and menus to work your way through to get to functions that honestly would be much more easily and much better handled with proper physical switches. And again, I decry the binning of physical switches. It's not a good idea. It makes cars harder to use, more distracting to use. And again, that hardly plays to traditional Volvo strengths now, does it? Speaking of traditional Volvo strengths, we need to check out the practicality of this car. So let's go and hop into the back and take a look at that. So as you can see, the limiting factor here in the back of the EX30 is going to be legroom. I have this seat set relatively far forward by my standards, and yet even so, legroom in the back is really quite tight. The floor is quite high, so my knees are up high, my feet are up high. It's just not the most comfortable environment. There is good headroom. It's not a completely flat floor. There is a slight hump in the floor, which does rob a bit of foot space if you're trying to put someone here in the middle seat. But to be honest with you, I wouldn't be trying to put someone here in the middle seat unless everyone in the back is really quite small and or skinny. Really, it's a kids-only environment. I wouldn't be putting too many adults back here. The glass roof does help because there's no sun blind on it. It's heat-absorbing and UV-absorbing, so it doesn't rob headroom. There is plenty of space in that respect, and it does let in an awful lot of light, which is good because, as you can see, the side windows are quite shallow and they do slope up quite sharply. So getting light into the back of the cabin is definitely something you want to do. In terms of overall practicality, there's reasonable boot space in the back, 400 litres loaded up to the luggage cover, which is quite good for the overall size of car. And there is a frunk. It's only 7 litres, but it's enough to cram in a charging cable when you need to. So that is very helpful. But yeah, you wouldn't want to think of this as being a traditional Volvo in the 245 GL estate sense. It's not the kind of car you can start cramming, bikes and boxes and pets and other paraphernalia into. It's practical enough, I think, for a growing family, but once your kids are teenagers, their knees are going to be sticking into the backs of the seats. So what is the EX30 actually like to drive? Well, I think first of all we need to talk about power, because as I mentioned earlier, this has the same power, 272 horsepower, as an early 90s Porsche 911 Carrera 2. And that is a lot of grunt for a relatively compact family car. And it feels it too. This feels pretty quick to drive. It'll do 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in a good bit under 6 seconds. So that's Golf GTI pace and then some. It's really quite quick. Now there is the option of a high-end four-wheel drive two-motor version packing 428 horsepower, which will do 0 to 100 in 3.6 seconds. It's stupidly quick. It's the fastest Volvo there's ever been. And to be honest, it's a bit daft. You really don't need it. That much acceleration in a family car, I think it raises some serious questions, particularly coming from Volvo, which is a brand built around safety and dependability and practicality. Who needs a family hauler that can do 3.6 to 100? You're just generating vomit for your kids at that point. It's a shame that we haven't got the basic small battery version here to test, because I do think that might actually be the sweet spot of the entire range. This version, the extended range with the single motor, this will probably be the best seller, and it's going to cost in and around mid 46,000 euro, depending on what spec you put on it. In terms of handling and dynamics, it is good, but it's not a driver's car by any stretch. The steering, which you can adjust the feel and sort of stiffness of, but even in its sportiest setting, it's very light and doesn't give an awful lot of feedback. So, it's not a machine for getting up early on a Sunday morning for a blast over a favourite back road. That said, it's quite sweet to drive. It's well balanced. It's quite heavy, 1,700 kilos at the curb. It's not the worst offender in electric car terms, but it is, reasonably chunky. And on tight corners, you do feel that. The weight just starts to push you towards the outside of the corner, kind of inevitably. But up to that point, it actually feels nice and nippy and agile. It's really good around town because you've got very good visibility all round. Volvo have angled these quite chunky windscreen pillars, so you can see out well. There's a very good surround camera and sensor system that picks up when people are in your blind spot and so on. And it's not a particularly massive car either. It's nice and compact. So in town, it's really, really good. On the open road, as I say, not balls of fire, not masses of fun, but enjoyable enough, actually. And as I say, that kind of sweet, progressive, well-balanced feeling. It rides well on these 19-inch wheels, but a version we tried yesterday with the 20-inch wheels felt too stiff around town, too bump-thumpy. So I would avoid those if I were you. I think at the price this car is coming in at, that cheapest version with the cheap battery and the short range at €38,000, it represents a lot of car and a lot of badge, particularly for the money. Getting a Volvo on your driveway for under €40,000 these days, that's quite good going, particularly given all the safety kit comes as standard, more or less. And you do get, as standard things like the big screen and the nice seats and so on. You don't get you won't get the nice Harman Kardon sound system as standard, but that's another day's work. That makes this a very, very tempting car, I feel. This is probably the most usable version, this long-range one, with the more expensive battery. And it does seem to have a fairly reliable range as far as we can tell. Again, we need to drive it at home to really get under the skin of that properly. You don't need the four-wheel drive performance version. It's just a bit daft. But I think this could shake up the market a bit because it is bringing in that premium badge, at a price that's in and around the same, slightly less than, say, a Volkswagen ID3. It's coming in at sort of similar money to a Jeep Avenger, yet in mid-spec has more range than that car. It's going to stir up a bit of interest, I think, and rightly so. It's a very interesting car. I do think there are some flaws, such as the over-reliance on the single screen, such as the lack of rear seat space, but I think this cabin as a whole really makes up for a lot of that. And I think when people sit in this, they sit in this in a showroom and they think, crikey, I can get this on my driveway for, say between 38 and 45,000 euro, and it looks like this, I think I'm going to be pretty happy. And I think a lot of people might be pretty happy. So I think this could be a significant car for Volvo in the Irish market, and it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out when the first customer cars start to arrive, hopefully in January, certainly in Q1 of next year.